once I left the military in 2008, I got asked to work with journalists, initially providing security as a security advisor out on the ground, doing like a backwatch for journalists working in conflict zones. Really, I've been doing that now for 12 years, but in the last couple of years, I've been focusing more on the training side. I try to still get out on the ground and work with journalists, because obviously the way that you work is always evolving and changing. It has to adapt to the way that the budgets and the world is changing. So it's nice to still get out on the ground and see how you're working, and be current and bring that back into the training environment that I generally work in. I work all around the world training journalists. A lot of them are freelance journalists, and I work very closely with an organisation called IWMF, which is the International Women's Media Foundation as well. So thanks to Kat, this is the third webinar we've been doing over the last 5 or 6 weeks, while we find ourselves in these challenging times with a COVID-19 pandemic. But also, obviously, for yourselves, especially in America, and again, I know it's gone global now, but where the George Floyd protests and demonstrations started back in May. So already a challenging time, having to think about corona virus, and now obviously with the demonstrations, and also with the upcoming electoral political rallies as well, that you'll probably find yourselves covering. So on this webinar, between 60 and 90 minutes, we're going to talk about situational awareness, the police tactics, and how we can recognise what the police are doing and why they're doing them, and hopefully by doing that we'll be able to put ourselves in a safer position to be able to get your stories from. And then we're going to finish off talking about conflict management, how we deal with escalating violence, and then I've put together a couple of small videos that we managed to do this morning about disengagement skills. So if people do sort of start to grab hold of you, if we can't actually de-escalate the harassment or intimidation, if people actually physically get hold of you, how can we sort of do some simple manoeuvres to get out and then hopefully run away or get to a safe space. Please ask questions. We've only got, you know, a relatively small amount of time with lots of information to get in, so I can't cover absolutely everything, but please, you know, the people that have you've logged on to this webinar to learn or to refresh your knowledge, and I'm sure you're probably hoping that I will cover certain things. If I don't, then please, or if you want more information about what I'm speaking about, just put your questions either in the Q&A or raise a hand, and Kat's going to be monitoring that throughout this webinar. I will pause and take questions as we go through, rather than wait until the end. So if people haven't already sort of, on previous webinars, we've spoken about planning and how important the planning phase is before we even go out onto the ground. So I'm going to start off just with a couple of slides to refresh people on that, or if you didn't come on the other webinars. But media safety is paramount now. You know, harassment and attacks on journalists, physical, verbal, online, social media harassment. It's on the rise. It's not going away, and it makes your job really difficult and unsafe in a lot of places that you work. It's coming on all sides. You know, you get harassment and attacks by the police and by the protesters as well. So really difficult situation for yourself to be in. But we're going to talk about that in a little bit more detail in a moment, and hopefully how we can sort of mitigate getting caught up in that violence in the first place. Just 4 names there and a couple of pictures. The pictures are of Linda Tirado, and the gentleman on the right there is Adolfo Lopez. They were just 2 of very, very many journalists that have been hurt during the George Floyd demonstrations. These 2 journalists got hurt within the first week, both by rubber bullets. And as you can see, Linda actually posted that she'd lost permanent vision in her left eye. I really hope that, you know, she can regain and recover, but rubber bullets can be lethal, and we're going to talk about sort of police tactics as we go through the webinar. So just going back to what I was saying, you know, the planning phase, I'm not going to talk about planning in great detail today, but it's one of the most important aspects, because while we're sort of thinking about going out, maybe you're going to cover the demonstrations this weekend, one of the most important things you've got to ask yourself really is your aim. Whether you're a photographer or a writer, whatever your job is, you know, what angle do you want to get your story from? How do you want to cover this story? And if you ask yourself what your aim is, then hopefully you're going to be able to achieve that aim more quickly, because you'll know roughly what area or what type of people you want to speak to, what part of the demonstration you need to get at. And by doing that, you're going to limit your time on the ground, or limit your time within a big volume of people. And by doing so, you're going to limit your exposure to the threats that are out there. Again, the threats, we will sort of talk about them in general as we go through, but they were on the previous webinar, and I'm sure Kat will give you the link to that should you want to look at the threat and risk assessment in more detail at a later date. You've got to ask yourself, what are the threats that are posed to me though as a journalist, whether it's from the police or whether it's from the protesters themselves, and then how do you actually lower your exposure to those threats? So it might be your profile. Yeah. If we're trying to blend in because you want to be with all the protesters, then maybe your profile, you know, you're going to dress like a protester. Well, that's fine until the police start trying to contain protesters, and then maybe you want to then identify yourself as a journalist. So how can you do that? How can you change your profile quite quickly? Or maybe you want to be very overt as a journalist because you're more working around the police side and you don't want the harassment from the police. Although, as we've quite clearly seen, especially on the demonstrations over the last 5 weeks, even when you've quite clearly got press and media on your clothing, it still doesn't stop the harassment from the police necessarily. Think about what equipment you need to take with you and how you're going to carry that equipment to the areas of the protests and the rallies. Again, I'll come back to that in a little while. We need to know knowledge of the area and the venues. Again, I'm going to come back to that. Your ground knowledge and safe havens and history of events. History of events, you know, when we're looking at the political rallies that are coming up, what's happened in recent years, if the rallies have turned violent, what were the triggering points? Most rallies start quite okay, but then, you know, then all of a sudden they erupt, and they can erupt quite quickly into violence. So what makes these sort of friendly rallies turn nasty all of a sudden? So look at the triggers. What starts the turn of events? Is it because of the police and the intimidation, or the way the police are handling the events, or is it the protesters or the crowd that are there that actually incite that violence? So look at the history of events and look at the last 5 weeks. You know, the demonstrations on a weekend, do they turn nasty? When do they turn nasty? Is it normally late at night when everybody's getting, you know, the nerves are getting frayed and everything? Because that's the time that you need to get away from being in the middle of a crowd to the outer edges to make it more safe for yourself. One of the important things, and that's what we're going to talk about in a minute then, is the tactics of the police as well. Because if we can understand the way that the police work, then we're aware of what the police are doing, then it gives us a little bit of time to hopefully move to a safer area, so we're not getting caught up in kettling, for instance. I've just put these extra 2 slides in, really, because the indoor considerations now, I haven't spoken about before, but I know because the political rallies are coming up and a lot of the venues are held inside, like the ones in Oklahoma, was it last weekend or the weekend before? So you've got to think of slightly different things. What's the dangers to yourself when you go inside political rallies? You know, what is the threat? You'll find that if you go inside a venue, especially for the political rallies, the police are not really a threat to you at all. But you know, if you go into a rally where it's pro-Trump supporters, maybe they're a threat to the media. Yeah. And so in that situation, maybe you do want to dress more like a pro-Trump supporter, so you blend in more, so it lowers your profile. Get to the venue early. Have a look outside the venue, especially if you're not familiar with it. You know, where are the exits? Where do the different exits lead out onto? Is the venue completely enclosed, or can you, you know, come out the back exit maybe straight onto the sidewalk? So have a good look around the venue. Have a look at where you can get out quickly should you need to have to do so. What equipment are you allowed to take in there? You know, as a journalist, you've probably had to apply and showing your press pass and accreditation to get access into the building in the first place. But what equipment are you allowed to take in? You know, especially if you're carrying medical equipment, then you might get scissors and things like that taken off you. Once inside the venue, what angle are you looking to cover that story from, and where do you stand? Where do you position yourself? If you're right at the very front, you know, of a big crowd, and if there's a surge forward, then there's a likelihood you might get crushed or squashed, or if something does happen quickly, then you're more contained and it's more difficult to get out quickly. So do you want to maybe stand around the sides of the walls of the actual room itself? Something else to sort of think about. Or maybe you've got access to get down to the front and then move further to the outer edges as the rally goes on. Always know where your exits are. Yeah, always have that escape route planned, just in case the unexpected happens. I know a lot of people that are probably listening to this webinar are freelancers, and I know when you're freelancers, money is an issue and you tend to be working by yourselves. But there's lots of lone, solo media workers covering protests and rallies, and you'll soon become known to each other, yeah, or you can see other people that are media. Try and do a buddy system. Yeah, try and pair up. Because when we start talking about situation awareness in a moment, you'll find it's a lot easier if you've got a friend or a buddy that can watch your back, and then you can return the favour and watch theirs. And then listen to that gut feeling, yeah? Your gut feeling, it's a built-in mechanism, safety mechanism that's telling you something is not quite right. So you might not be able to see what the danger is, but if your body, you know, is telling you something is wrong, then I would say move to a safe area and just be flexible, reassess, have a good look around, and then go back if you feel it's okay to do so. If you're going to outdoor venues, demonstrations like most people have been covering the last 5 weeks, I would say arrive early. Again, have a good look at that area where the demonstration is going to take place. Even if it's familiar to yourself, still arrive early, because quite often you'll be able to speak to the police. Yeah, the police will be there because they'll be setting up their barriers, they'll be getting themselves ready. The PLO is the police liaison officer. If you can find that person as well, either before the demonstration or you know, on the morning, they can give you some good information, especially if they're anticipating that the demonstration is going to be a mobile one, it's going to move. Then what directions do they anticipate it going to? Where do they think the end point is? Are there any no-go areas? You might have looked at a map before you went to the venue, or maybe you've been there the week before, and you already know where your escape exits are should the rallies, the demonstration turn violent. When you get there this weekend, maybe the police have barricaded off that exit now. Yeah, so actually you won't be able to get down that route should you need to get away quickly. So re-familiarise yourself with what the police are doing and where they're putting their barriers, especially if they're sort of making big fenced in areas ready to contain people, because again, you don't want to end up being contained. Are there high vantage points around the area that you're going to be working in? You know, maybe it's a multi-storey car park where you can get on top and get some, you know, some good photos or your story from high up. Maybe there's local hotels where they've got like a rooftop garden. Go ask the manager, you know, can you get access to that? You don't always have to be right down on the ground level in the middle of a demonstration. Where's the safe havens? When it's all going wrong, you know, have these identified beforehand, because when demonstrations and protests turn violent, they turn violent quickly, and it's a very confusing situation, especially when we talk about tear gas, rubber bullets being fired, flashbangs going off, etc., etc. So it's easier to identify these places beforehand and if necessary, get yourself into a safe haven, whether it's a cafe or a restaurant or a hotel, or maybe it's your car park somewhere safe, maybe a couple of blocks away, where you can just go and just relax, take a breath, take a deep breather, speak to somebody if necessary, and then reassess and decide where you're going next. Situation awareness, then, this is one of the most important things about covering demonstrations safely. You've got to be aware of what is going on around you all the time. And that's really, really difficult when you work as a lone person. Yeah. And that's why we talk about this buddy-buddy system. Especially, you know, photographers, because you get so much tunnel vision when you're looking in your camera all the time, and we get caught up with the atmosphere and what's going on and all these great pictures, which is fantastic. But whenever we're just, you know, focusing on a story or a picture, we get tunnel vision. And when we get tunnel vision, we lose the sense of our hearing. And so we don't always hear everything that's going on around ourselves. Even somebody close by might be saying, hey, come on, we need to move, there's danger coming, and we don't hear that. We don't hear the different changing atmosphere of the crowd. And if we're not aware of something, then we can't anticipate and avoid that danger that's coming. So when we talk about situation awareness, most people might have heard of the Cooper's colour code system, and we talk about white. You know, white's relaxed when you're at home. Yellow is the colour which you should be in most of the time. Orange is when the alert levels are going up a little bit, and we have to be a little bit more alert and ready to act. But you can't be in orange all the time, especially if you're, you know, covering protests, demonstrations. It's a long day. If you're in orange to red for most of that day, you're going to hit burnout fairly quickly. And then red is when, you know, maybe we've finished at the demonstrations and we're walking back towards our car or back home. We've lowered our alert system a little bit because we're like, end of a long day, just want to get home, and we're not fully aware and focused, and we turn a corner and there's you know, maybe 3 or 4 people, and it's late and it's a dark street, and we don't have time to avoid them, because as we turn the corner, that's where they are. That's when your body then goes up into red, because we're preparing ourselves to either, you know, if these people start to attack us, do we stand and fight, or are we going to try and quickly run away? So a small video just to explain, oops, what I've put there. Very short video, just to put it in.
White is chilled or unaware. You should be in white only when somewhere safe, such as at home. Yellow is alert but relaxed. You are aware of your surroundings and possible dangers. This should be your normal state in public. Orange is reactive. You think or know there is a threat to you, and you focus on it until the danger passes. Red is ready. There is a definite threat to you, and you are ready to react. Always try to remain in yellow. You can be alert but relaxed for long periods of time. It is the best state to see, recognize, and react to potential issues.
Okay, so the way I sort of teach people how to be situation awareness is with the 3 A's. You've got to have that awareness. You've got to practice being aware. It is a little bit of a skill, yeah. So just start looking at things, and really, when you're in crowds, instead of sort of putting your camera down 5 minutes while you have a little break, actually take notice of what is around you and what's happening in that crowd. Because if we can see things happening, or there's a build-up of something happening, then hopefully it gives us time to be able to get to a safe area to avoid being caught up in that trouble. So let's have a look, you know, what's going on around you and how might it affect your safety? We might have to look at the police. What are the police doing? Yeah. What can we see the police doing? How are they acting? Do they look all calm? Do they look a bit twitchy? Yeah, do they look like they're getting excited and maybe putting a respirator on, or maybe putting gas canisters on the weapons that they're using? And if we can see this, then we can, like I said, we can anticipate. And if we feel that we're in the area that the gas rounds are going to come, then hopefully we've got a little bit of time to move out of the way, or to put our personal protection equipment on to save ourselves getting gassed as well. So knowing police tactics can give us valuable time to get to a safe place, and a safer place to then film what's going to be happening around you. So one of the police tactics really is containment. They try to contain the crowd, especially when the crowd's getting unruly, or they're going into areas that the police don't want them to be. And the first sort of start of this is, as you can see on the picture there, you'll see the police with the huge shields. You have big heavy shields. They have the helmets on and the goggles, and they form this, what we call the baseline. It's like a big human barrier. Now, the problem with a lot of police, or the different states in America, is police get training to a different level, and they get different budgets, and they're not all as well trained as each other. And certainly when the police that form this baseline, especially with these big helmets on, not all the states have spent the money to have some good sort of radio equipment inside those helmets. So effectively, some of these police people are literally deaf with their helmets on. And so they're not getting clear orders. And when the confusion breaks out and, you know, and things are getting violent, then basically they're just looking at the person next to them and seeing how they're reacting. And if they're overreacting and you know, starting to get the batons out and hitting people, then that just kind of passes down the line because they're as confused. They don't really know what's going on. They don't understand what's going on. So that's something to be aware of as well. Behind this baseline, though, you then kind of get a second line of police, and they're what we call the snatch team. And the snatch team are more mobile, they're more agile. They don't have the big shields. They'll just have maybe a baton and the handcuffs. And when we talk about detaining people in a couple of slides' time, I'll tell you how they work. The baseline, though, or the containment, the way that the police contain people is using what we call kettling. And that's to control the crowd. It's nothing more really than to control the crowd and to put the crowd, or try and steer the crowd, into a cordon that the police have formed. So that if you see the police, this baseline, starting to extend down the sides of the crowd, they're basically going, you know, around the crowd. That's to box the crowd in, to then start pushing and forcing the crowd into a certain direction. And that direction will be into an area that the police have already cordoned off with barriers. And that's why if you get to, you know, the area early and you can identify these areas that are already cordoned off with the barriers, then if you feel the crowd are being pushed that way, you know, there's a good chance that you're going to get trapped in these holding pens, basically, and you could be there for hours. So you definitely need to start, you know, getting out of that. When you see the police sort of start to surround the crowd, that's when you need to move and get either behind the police or to the outer edges. Sometimes if media get caught up, lots of innocent people get caught up in these kettling. If you identify yourself as media once you're within this holding area, sometimes you get let out, but quite often you don't. Okay, and you could be in there for quite a few hours. Other police tactics that we're looking at is the skirmish lines. A skirmish line is very similar really to that baseline, but this time you'll see forming up behind the skirmish line is police with gas canisters, you know, the police that are going to fire the gas, or maybe they've got weapons that look like paintball guns, and they're the police that are firing paint at people to identify who they want the snatch team to arrest and detain. The skirmish lines then, it's a line of police. They've definitely got a back or a third row of police as well in there, the snatch squad, and they've got a leader. And when it's all in place, the leader will give the order, and they give the order for the police with the pepper spray or the tear gas or whatever form or whatever method they're using to disperse the crowd. We know lots of pepper spray and tear gas is used in the States. We also get this flash thunder grenade, which there's a picture on the bottom there. They are very, very loud. If you've not experienced a flash thunder grenade, I would suggest you don't particularly want to be close to them when they go off. They're about 182 decibel is the bang. And the bright light that is given off as well is about the equivalent of 1.5 million candles. So very, very bright light as well. And we don't particularly want to be close by to those when they go off. Other things that can be used, vehicles, horses, dogs, yeah, they're used to sort of disperse the crowd. You may have been in areas where they use water cannons, and I've seen now that they're starting to use the big sort of loud noise machine. I've forgotten the correct word. I'll come back to the correct terminology for it in a second. But it's like a huge loudspeaker, and you know, it just blasts people's eardrums and makes them disperse. Tear gas, then just a couple of slides on the tear gas, because it is the most sort of common thing that's used to disperse the crowds, along with I'll speak about the rubber bullets in a moment. Tear gas is not nice should you get caught up in it, and haven't really got time to talk about sort of your personal protective equipment that you're going to take with you to protect you from tear gas. But I'll send Kat some information at the end of this webinar, and she can get the link out to you all. And there's extra information in there about equipment that you can buy, manufactured equipment, and which is a recommended equipment. And then, of course, how you can improvise should you need to do so. Tear gas, though, again, you know, if we're aware, if we can see what is going on, then possibly we're seeing the police putting on their respirators. We can see them putting the gas canisters on. We definitely need to either put our personal protective equipment on, or we need to get to the side or get upwind. Yeah, so if you know which way the wind is blowing, get upwind, so that obviously you're not going to get caught up in all the gas. If you do get caught up though, it really, really does irritate the eyes. So you need to have some water to rinse the eyes out. And you rinse the eyes from the inside near the nose, obviously tilting your head down so the gas is running away from the face, and then you do this to the opposite side. Do you wear contact lenses or glasses? It's a question I get asked quite a lot. If you are blind without your glasses, then if you have to take glasses, then I would suggest you put sort of a piece of elastic or cord around the back, so it might help you stop them from being knocked off. Obviously the glasses, your normal glasses, are not going to stop gas, but you can get protective glasses that go over the top. Contact lenses, I think a little bit better, but obviously if you haven't got the correct protective equipment to stop gas getting into your eyes, then the gas will get behind the contact lenses, and it's really, really painful and irritable. It's better to hang your clothes out in the wind should you get it full of gas. It blows out a lot faster than it is to wash out. And a cold shower is preferable, because if you take a hot shower, it opens up your pores and then the gas gets further in. More information on that in the link post-webinar. Police weapons and other things that you'll come across that are very common these days are the pepper balls, which is like, it's the one down here, there, sorry, and it's fired, and when it's impacted, it releases the pepper, which is a little bit like the gas. Slugs and rubber bullets as well. Rubber bullets are lethal. They really were designed to sort of bounce off the floor and hit people's limbs. But as we all know, and from the photographs I showed you on the first slide, you know, they get people in the eyes, people in the throat. If you get hit at short range around your area of your heart, it can put you into ventricular fibrillation and you get cardiac arrest. So we really need to be aware of, before we even go to protest, you know, what do the police use? What kind of tactics do they use? What weapons are they using? And then you know what equipment to take to protect yourself should you get caught up, and also what medical equipment you need to be able to fix any injuries that you might sustain. And then, so we've had the containment, we dispersed the crowd, and then the last thing really is maybe the police are going to arrest and detain you. So, and this is where the snatch team come in. Yeah, they don't wear big protective or big shields because they need to move fast. They have to be agile. That baseline of police, they're going to open up their shields. These members of the snatch team go out to the crowd, and they snatch the person that they believe is, you know, is causing the violence or has caused some offence, and then they quickly just pull them back in behind those large shields, behind that defence line. The police close the shields again, and then the person's taken off and detained. Hopefully you won't be, you know, grabbed by the snatch team. We shouldn't be in that situation, but we have seen quite a lot of journalists apprehended. We've seen a lot of journalists being detained, quite wrongly as well, because we've seen a lot of journalists being videoed while they've been detained. And again, if you're using that buddy-buddy system, if you find somebody that you can sort of team up with while you're at these places, if the police are giving you undue harassment for whatever reason, the other person can then video that, and that's hard evidence for you should it go to court. And that is far better than just your word against theirs. What rights do the police have to confiscate your equipment? What rights do they have to get you to delete footage that you might have taken of them or of somebody else? Again, I'm going to put it in the post-webinar information, but you know, as a journalist, as a citizen, you've got your rights as of the First and Fourth Amendment. You shouldn't have to, you don't have to give up any equipment to the police. But if they are adamant that they want that equipment, then I would say give it up. It's one thing knowing your rights. It's another thing being able to win that argument with police. And I would say more often than not, you will lose and you will get detained. And if you get detained, it's going to be another couple of hours, if not overnight, and you've lost, you know, a day's work, a night's work. More information for you to read in the Dropbox, but just think about what equipment you're taking and what stories, you know, even when we talk about your smartphones, what information's on that smartphone that you wouldn't want the police or somebody else, should they, you know, rob you, having a look at. So download any sensitive information or any of the photographs or stories that you have on your equipment. Take clean equipment if you can. One of the problems that I've seen with journalists as well over the last few weeks is having equipment stolen, especially cameras. You know, cameras are really valuable. And so how do we sort of lessen our risk to that crime? I would say when you're traveling to and from the demonstrations or the political rallies, if you're carrying a camera bag, it's telling people there's cameras in there, you know, and so it's making you a high valuable target. Try and use an old shopping bag, put your camera equipment and things in there. So if anybody's, you know, you're walking down the street or something, people just think it's a bag of shopping, and then you just get your equipment out and, you know, and become that high value target when you need to. And then again, lower your profile when you're actually using that equipment. Intimidation is definitely one of the police tactics that they use, and we'll talk about that in a second. And also quite a few journalists over the last 5 weeks in the recent demonstrations have been detained. Definitely for all you freelance people out there, or even if you do work for an editor or whoever, that is the number I've just put up there for the Freedom of Press hotline. It's a legal defence hotline. I would write that number in a Sharpie pen down your forearm, okay? It's okay having it in your mobile phone, but if the police have taken your phone or you've lost your phone, this is one of the numbers that you definitely need should you get detained, because you need to let people know as soon as possible. And the legal defence hotline from the Freedom of Press will put you in touch with local attorneys close to where you are, and they'll give you that advice. So we'll talk about situation awareness. I'm just going to put a slide up and just sort of explain a few things, and then I'm just going to pause for 5 minutes and see if we've got any questions before I move on to the next subject. But we've got a situation, okay, if we picture ourselves, we're at this protest. You know, this was in this photo was actually from the first week of the George Floyd protest demonstrations. And if you imagine you're a journalist and you've just gone into a building to do an interview, and you were trying to get the a story sort of from the police angle and about the curfews and things. When you went into that police building, it was fairly quiet outside. But as you come to leave, having got your story, this crowd, this picture of people that you see here, they're all surrounding that police building. So what do we do as a journalist? You know, they look quite angry. What's our choices as a journalist now? Do we just do we continue straight out of the building and into this crowd, or do we have other options? And that's what situational awareness is all about. It's trying to weigh up what we're confronted with and hopefully do something about it so it makes us safer still to be able to get that story. So just a couple of options that I sort of thought about is maybe we can, you know, it might be that we can't see through a window to see the crowd before we leave the building, but as we step outside and we see this, maybe we can then take a step back inside that building and have a little reassess. Yeah, do we have any other options? And the options could be, is it an alternative exit to the building? It might be if we go out of a back door or a side door, that there's no crowd outside that area, and so we can leave safely, quietly, and without being the focus of the crowd, and then we can make our way to the front of the building, walking along the outer edges of the crowd, and then try and get our story and see, you know, what the crowd's all about. Or maybe we just continue walking straight out the front door of the building, and we're now the focus of that crowd, and maybe that gives you a great story, maybe it gives you great pictures. There's no sort of right and wrong answers here, but it also might give you a lot more intimidation from the crowd itself. You know, you might become their focal point, and then they might all be shouting at you and wanting to put their side of the story across, etc., etc. So there's never a right and wrong way to approach these things, but the more time you give yourself to ask yourself different questions, could I do this from a different point of view? Do I have to put myself right in the middle of that crowd? Sometimes the answer is yes, okay? But if we have to, how can we do that safely? So, do we have any questions at the moment, Kat? Please, just want to have a quick drink. Any questions at all? I'm not quite sure if I can see any questions.
I do not see any right now.
Okay, let's go on then. So we're going back to those 3 A's, the awareness, yeah. We're aware before we come out of that building, there's a crowd there, then we can anticipate it and, you know, maybe leave by that side door and actually avoid the crowd altogether. We asked ourselves what the police are doing, yeah. When you're covering these, anywhere where there's a huge volume of people, if you can't find someone to partner up with to be a buddy-buddy, okay? And when we're doing a buddy-buddy system, I mean that maybe you're taking your photographs and the person that you've, the other journalists that you've sort of teamed up with, they're covering your back. So they're your all eyes, they're your vision, they're your hearing while you're doing your photographs. Then when you've done your 15, 20 minutes, you then become their eyes and ears, yeah? So while they're getting their story, you're looking all around, you're listening to the atmosphere of the crowd. Has the atmosphere changed? Are they chanting something different? You know, are the emotions getting high? Because when people get very emotional, that's when it starts to turn a little bit violent generally. What are the demonstrators doing? Are they covering their faces maybe with scarves? Does that mean that they can anticipate gas being fired our way? Does it mean that they might start looting and they want to cover their face so that it can't be recognised on video that people are taking? So just by looking around, it's giving you lots of good indicators that if something happens, and if we're certainly in the middle of that crowd, we need to start making our way to the outer edges. If you don't have the luxury of having a teammate or a buddy system, then it's quite difficult as a lone worker. You have to be quite disciplined. One of the better ways to sort of get into that discipline mode, I would say maybe set your mobile phone alarm for every 15 minutes. When the alarm goes off, especially if you're in the middle of a crowd, finish what you're doing and then get to the outer edges. Take 5 or 10 minutes. Yeah, it's like you're on a piece of elastic. So back out on the outer edges, which is where it's safe, because if things go wrong, we've got an exit route. While you're on the outer edges, take in that atmosphere and look around. Have a look to see where your nearest escape route is, should you need it. Have a look to see different possible angles you can get your story from. Don't forget to look up high. You might be able to get a high vantage point. And then once you've sort of reassessed and got all your answers, then if you have to go back into the crowd, go back into the crowd. But for 15 minutes, 10, 15 minutes, come back out again. So you're going in and coming out, going in and coming out. And that's one of the safest ways of doing it. If you just get in the middle and stay in the middle, before you know it, something will inflame the situation, and now there's nowhere out to the outer edges. So wherever that crowd's going, you're going, and you're going to be in the same danger as everybody else. Listen to that gut feeling. I mentioned it earlier. It's telling you for a reason that something's not quite right. So again, just take a little bit of time out, even if it's just going another block, another street away, where it's relatively calm, and just have a reassess of what you've done so far. Think about the stories that you've got so far. Have you got enough material? Do you need to stay all night? Or is it better to have an earlier night, come back tomorrow more refreshed? I spoke about your buddy buddy system, and that last one, you know, earlier I mentioned safe havens. Safe havens could be like a restaurant, it could be a cafe, your own vehicle. Now, if you're driving yourself to demonstrations, where is the best place to park your vehicle? You don't want it too far away, because obviously you're going to be tired and you don't want to be walking a long way back to your car. But if it's too close to the demonstrations, then maybe it will get looted or vandalized. But your vehicle can be used as a safe haven as well, perhaps. So, you know, if you've just been in a scary situation, or you've had some harassment, or, you know, you're just tired, then maybe you can get to your vehicle, sit inside, lock the doors, and just have a little bit of safe space for 5 or 10 minutes. What I would say, if you're in your vehicle, don't completely switch off. Don't get your laptop out and be engrossed in doing something, because we still need to maintain that situational awareness around ourselves. Hotel rooms are really good if you can get a nearby hotel room for the afternoon or the evening. And again, if you can get other freelance journalists that you know to sort of share the cost, then so much the better. You can get 4 or 5 room keys, and throughout the day or throughout the evening, it gives you a safe space to go back to upload footage and just sort of chill and have a coffee and reassess, and yeah, just a little bit of general self-care, because the hard, tense situations to work at demonstrations, and when they're going on night after night, if we don't take care of ourselves, then we'll end up with either burnout or we're just tired, and then our situational awareness drops, and that's when we start getting into trouble, or we start becoming a story. Intimidation and harassment is something that happens a lot. If you find it's happening to you, or you're getting unwanted attention, again, it's all about that situational awareness, really. I keep coming back to it, but if we're aware, you know, especially maybe if you're a lone female, and we're not aware because we're so engrossed in what we're doing, it might be that all of a sudden we're not near any other females, and so now we're getting, you know, unwanted attention because we're just surrounded by lots of men. So if you can see that you're sort of being pushed, or you're in an area where there's not many other females, try and get closer to other people. Move into a safer area. Try and move closer to people that you know or you feel more comfortable with. Or it might be try and move closer to the police, where maybe that's where you feel a little bit safer. If somebody is being sort of really verbal or hostile towards you, try not to sort of engage with them. I'm going to talk a little bit about conflict management in a moment, and how we can deal with that. Now, I'm not saying completely just ignore somebody if they're shouting and things at you, because if you completely ignore them, then that can inflame the situation as well. And the whole thing about conflict management is obviously to de-escalate and get ourselves away to safety and remove ourselves from that situation if possible. Again, I've mentioned it already, know your exits, yeah, and especially if that crowd or the demonstration is a moving, you know, it's a rolling demonstration, it's going from A to B, then, or maybe you're just working around the crowd, yeah, and we're going to different angles. Wherever you stop to take your photographs or to get another interview in your story, again, take a look around you. Where are my exits? It might be that there's a brick wall behind you. So if the threat is coming head on, if I go right, what am I going into? If I go left, what's my, you know, where's my safety then? If the police or people start throwing projectiles, what can I get behind? Yeah, what's going to be my shield? So I always have a plan. It doesn't take very long, but if you know your plan before it happens, it's so much easier to react and get there. If you've got no plan and the chaos happens, then you're going to get, you know, you're probably going to end up injured, hurt, or certainly mixed up in that situation. So keep reassessing the situation, keep reminding yourself. And if you are the brunt of anybody's intimidation, whether it's police or otherwise, or harassment, try and report it into somebody. Yeah, if you're whoever you're working for, or if you're by yourself and freelance, report it into somebody that you're communicating to, whether it's another work colleague that's not working, whether it's another work colleague that's out on the ground somewhere but not actually with you. But try and report it into somebody. And, you know, depending on how the situation was for you, then maybe just by talking it through with somebody, they can give you some more advice. And maybe, again, you know, that's the end of your day and you go away and go back the next day, or do you just go back to your safe haven, think it through and reassess? And actually, yes, you're quite happy to go back to cover the story, but going to do it from a different angle, maybe not get right into the thick of the crowd now, get a safer distance and just take that pressure off yourself a little bit. So when we talk about conflict management, we're really talk about how we react to somebody being violent towards you or violence around you. So we're trying to de-escalate a situation. And quite often we have to also think about triggers. What's triggered the violence in the first place? Have I triggered the violence because I've got a camera and I'm just too close to somebody and I've got too much in their face, and that's what's inflamed the situation? So if you can sort of identify the triggers to the violence in the first place, maybe we can actually do something about it, or try and avoid triggering other people in the future. So we'll talk about people's personal space. And certainly at the moment, personal space or social distancing is a huge factor with the coronavirus. And I know a lot of intimidation and violence is coming because some people don't wear masks and other people believe they should for their protection. So we have to sort of respect the other people around ourselves. And as a media person covering all these difficult events, I certainly hope you are protecting yourself from corona as much as possible. Not only at the demonstrations or the rallies, but also, you know, when you're leaving these places of work, getting home, disinfect your equipment, you know, and really look after your own self-hygiene and the hygiene of your equipment. Again, more information in that post-webinar information pack. So we're talking about distance, or sort of our personal distance. We're talking about our own demeanour. We're talking about our body language, and we're talking about our tone of voice as well, because quite often, you know, somebody that's been intimidating towards you or threatening towards you, we need to bring that level of violence down, and we'll only do that by using personal skills that we may have, or we need to think about how we can use our own personal skills. So one of the first things you need to do really is just think about your own personal safety. So we call this sort of safe model, but we're going to step back. By just automatically stepping back, we're creating a little bit of space between yourself and that person. And we're doing a quick assessment. And on that diagram there, it says POP, that's the person, P is for person, O is for object, and the other P is for place or the situation. So, you know, how many people are being threatening towards us? Do they have objects? Do they have weapons? What situation am I in? What place? Have I got places to escape to? Do I know my escape sort of exits, or am I cornered? At the same time, we're trying to evaluate different options available. Yeah, so is there help nearby? Quite often in crowds, it's confusing and there's lots of noise. So even if you start sort of shouting for help or trying to get people's attention, it goes unheard. You know, it's really difficult. Can we get ourselves away from there? How do we respond then? You need to use the best appropriate action you can, and everybody is a different individual, so we'll all respond differently, and it depends on what place we're in. But also, once we've chosen the way of how we're going to respond, and I'll come back to that in a second, because our body, you know, when we're getting a little bit frightened and anxious, the heart's going to be beating more, and your body's releasing some chemical cocktails. And these chemical cocktails, depending on the dosage of how much are being released, affects people, whether it might make you prepare to fight, to stand your ground, especially if you have no sort of immediate exits to go to, or it might make you want to run away, yeah, to flee. Or some people, it makes you actually freeze to the spot. And that's kind of what we don't want to do, because we want to be able to get out of that situation rather than just freeze to the spot. And then we need to sort of monitor situations, especially if we've managed to get ourselves out of that situation. Then we need to reassess, and where do we go from here? Do we go back there? Do we go to a different place in the crowd? Do we go back to our safe haven? So you have to reassess and try and find that best solution. So I've talked about a little bit of the conflict management, as in your body language, and your tone of voice. Now, if somebody's been really aggressive and you're very aggressive back, then that's going to escalate even more. It's just going to go up and it's going to get more violent. So when I've put emotional there, really it's about your emotion. It's about your emotional self-state as well. How much self-control do you have? If it's the first night of a rally or a demonstration or something, you might actually be quite relaxed. But if it's day 3, 4 or 5, you know, and you're tired, then your emotional state will be differently as well. So maybe you haven't got quite as much patience now and you're going to react differently. But we need to really try and keep calm, and we need to try and diffuse this situation. We need to try and diffuse it quickly. And so we need to sort of try and engage with this person. We need to try and engage with a nice, calm voice, maybe empathize with them, show them that you're listening, use a bit of eye contact, yeah, not too much, because if you sort of stare at somebody, it's going to make the situation worse. But if you're looking away from them all the time, that's going to annoy people as well. So a little bit of eye contact, keep your voice nice and calm, even though we're panicking a little bit, we're frightened. It's a terrifying situation to be in sometimes. But if we remain calm and talk nice and calmly, then hopefully this person will start to come down a little bit and calm down. And hopefully that's going to resolve or buy you a little bit of time to get into a safer area. Maybe you can resolve the situation by sort of saying, okay, I understand what you're saying. You know, maybe I can interview you or get your side of the story. It all depends on what the conflict was about in the first place. Okay, but we're just trying to buy ourselves time at the moment to find how we can get into a safe space, to get ourselves safe, and again reassess the situation. Ask yourself, how did I get into that situation in the first place? Did I put myself there? Was it because I was so engrossed in taking photographs or interviewing somebody that I wasn't situationally aware of what was going on around myself? or it might be that there was nothing that you could have done about the situation. It just happened, because sometimes we are in the wrong place at the right time. The first thing the way I sort of teach conflict management, and you know, I'm saying about the space and your body language, one of the most powerful sort of body language things we can do is what we call open palms, and that's sort of showing somebody your hands if you can. Because if we're showing somebody both our hands, we're showing them that we haven't got a weapon. Whereas if you stood with one hand in the pocket, you know, have you got a gun? Have you got a knife? And I know quite a lot of people that are probably listening to this webinar, you work in states where people carry. Now, whether that's overtly carry or covertly carry, it makes me feel so uncomfortable. I personally do not like, that's the one thing I don't like about America, is there's just so many people with weapons. So to diffuse the situation initially, get these hands up, you know, look, I'm not a threat to you. I haven't got any weapons. And I'll talk about the hands a little bit more when we're on the next couple of slides about the disengagement skills. Think about the position, your position. Where are your exits? Yeah, because when we're trying to talk to these people and we're trying to move, maybe my exit isn't behind me, it's off to one side. So I need to try and maneuver myself as I'm talking to this person into a better position to be able to maybe run away to a safe space. Talked a little bit about the attitude already. You know, if your attitude will affect them. So if you're aggressive, it's not going to get any better. It's going to get worse. So we've got to try and have a nice, calm, positive, helpful attitude, even though we're frightened and we want these people to go away. But by trying to be sort of helpful and positive in a nice, calm manner, we're going to start de-escalating. Look and listen, yeah, actively look around. Maybe there's help around that we can use, but also look at the person, you know, use that little bit of eye contact. Try and listen to what they're saying. And if you can listen to what they're saying, maybe you can use that to, again, help de-escalate the situation, rather than just sort of talking that doesn't answer any of their questions. Yeah. Make space. We need to keep a comfortable distance away from this person. So if they throw a punch, hopefully they're not going to connect. And we're going to talk about the stance in a second as well. How do we face these people? How do we stand? How do we angle our body towards them? So that's what I'm going to come on to in a second. Do we have any questions at the moment, Kat? I know I'm sort of rattling through and we're just about at the hour stage now. Any questions on police tactics or anything that I've covered before I go on to the de-escalation skills? No, I take the silence as no. So I'm just going to finish off with probably about 5 more slides with some small videos. Again, I'm going to back up this information with some post-webinar information. I'll put some of the videos into the box as well so you can look at afterwards, because with the escalation skills, you need to, you know, when you're at home this evening or when you get friends around, or maybe use your loved ones or your husbands and wives, girlfriends, just practice. Yeah, we need to practice these disengagement skills. So we're trying the conflict management. Okay, if somebody's coming up to you in the street and they're saying, give me your wallet, yeah, we're going to start with the conflict management first. We're going to do our hands up. We're going to say, okay, you know, I'm going to give you my wallet. But as we're saying, okay, I'll give you my wallet, we need to think about our safety as well. And so I'm going to talk you through a couple of these videos and what actions we should be taking. So the square on stance is when somebody is apprehending you and they're stood face to face with you. Now, if we're stood face to face, if that person just sort of reaches out or pushes you forward, or just, you know, don't have to push very hard into your chest, you're going to fall on your backside, because we've got no leverage at all. So I think this first little video sort of shows that. Okay, so it's very easy to lose your balance. So, you know, in conflict management, we were talking about we need to get a little bit of space. So we're going to put our hands up, you know, show a person that we haven't got any weapons. We'll talk about the hands in the next little video. But we're also going to talk about the boxer stance as well, because the boxer stance is when we actually turn our body away from the attacker, or the person that's been destructive, and just by simply turning your body sideways on, we've now got a better balance, so we're not going to fall over, but also we've reduced the surface area of our body that person can physically attack. So again, just a short video. Okay. So again, you know, if you weren't aware of your sort of escape route, you have to quickly think about that while we're maintaining the safe distance. And the safe distance is really, you know, sort of just more than the arm length of the person. So if they do go to strike you, we can quickly take that step back again. Small steps if possible, because if we're going to do big steps, we're more likely to trip up. And then if we're on the floor, we've got more danger. It's a lot more difficult. So at the moment, we're just trying to keep people at arm's length, and while we talk to them and try and, you know, bring them down a little bit. If we can't keep this person at arm's length, and they manage to get hold of you for whatever reason, then there's a couple of grips that are quite easy to get out of. In fact, they're very easy to get out of. And this is what you need to practice with somebody else afterwards. So the first one is a wrist grip. Now, I sort of said, if somebody says to you, give me a mobile phone or give me your wallet, we're going to do this conflict management. We're going to make that space. We're going to turn our side on to the person. And then again, you don't want to, I mean, if they want something, especially if they've got a weapon, we're going to give that person what they want. We don't want to make any sudden movement to quickly grab something out of our pocket, because again, you're going to excite that person. You're going to get them anxious, because what are we pulling out of our pocket? So again, point, okay, it's in this pocket. I'm going to get my wallet out of this pocket. Take it out slowly. And when we don't want to hand the wallet across to them, because they might then grab hold of your hand. And if they've got hold of your hand, then they're, oh, right, give me your earrings, give me your telephone, yeah, and we're stuck. So when we sort of hand out our wallet or the phone, whatever they've asked for, obviously we're going to be nervous and just try and sort of gently drop it to one side. Now, I don't mean throw it, because if we throw it, that's going to really anger them and the violence is going to get more. But if we can just sort of drop it, as in you've been nervous, to one side, they will bend down to pick it up and we can run at the same time. But if we haven't managed to do that and they've actually physically got hold of ourselves, then this is what we need to do. Oh, sorry. Okay, so as it said there, you know, your thumb is a lever, and it's very easy. Just put pressure against that thumb to open up that gateway. If I was pressing down against the fingers, then I wouldn't be able to break that finger hold. Okay, the fingers are a lot more tight hold. So when somebody grabs hold of you, look at the position of the thumb, and if the thumb is uppermost on the wrist, then we call it take a drink, you know, like you're having a drink. And it will just lift that thumb up out of the way, especially if you're taking these people by surprise. The next one is what we call a parent grip, and it's like the overarm grip on somebody. So again, on the picture straight away, you can see that the thumb now is actually underneath my arm. So I'm going to do the complete opposite to what I've just done, and I'm going to push my arm backwards. So we'll watch the small video. Yeah, if I'd have gone upwards against that grip, I wouldn't have released that grip. So always go against the thumb. Oh, I'm not sure if that was, sorry. Oops. Was that the same video? Yeah, so that second video there is if somebody grabs hold of you and you struggle, which is the natural reaction, their grip will naturally tighten. Yeah, and so when you try and go against that thumb, it will be more difficult. So what you have to do, and it goes against all what you want to do, you have to sort of go closer to the person as if you're allowing them to pull you, and their arm will come in more loose, and then you'll be able to do that maneuver of just pushing against the thumb and then hopefully making some space to run away. Because this is what we're talking about at the moment. You know, we've done the conflict management. The next level up is just trying to get hold of somebody's hold and get into a safe space. We're not talking about fighting, okay? Fighting is a last resort. The next one then is if somebody's got hold of your clothes. So if somebody's grabbed hold of your clothing, this is what we do. Okay, I'm going to give you a different variation of that in a moment, but if you practice this particular hold and grip, then we always push the attacker's wrist. Now this is a demonstration of pushing the person the wrong way. Okay, so you've got to think about, you need to push that person so the shoulder is turning away from you, because if we get mixed up in all the confusion, yeah, so we don't want to push the attacker the wrong way, because it still leaves him square on in front of you and he can still attack you. Yeah, so I always think you've got to push them away so it's turning the back so that you can then run. Now, in most attacks, you know, if it's a violent attack, then we're not going to push that wrist like I showed you in the first video. We're going to go for the elbow, and I'll explain why. Yeah. So like I said, don't do that one in practice, only do that for real, because if the attacker doesn't let go, we're going against that elbow joint, and if we give it a good hard push, then the joint will break. The person's got to let go. So when you're practicing, practice the C on the wrist. Okay. And a couple more just to finish off. If somebody gets you in a stranglehold, okay, somebody's come from behind and they've got you in a stranglehold. Yeah, if they've got the bone, the single bone here, across your throat, they don't have to put a lot of pressure on there to inhibit your breathing. Yeah, it's extremely, extremely uncomfortable. And a lot of people try to start fighting the attacker off first. Yeah, we'll be throwing our elbows and doing anything we can because we can't breathe. What we really need to be doing is getting our windpipe, yeah, into the crook of the elbow of the attacker, if we can. Oops, if we can. So we need to be trying to to get hold of the attacker's arm and really pushing yourself across, wriggling across to get into that crook there, which will release the pressure on your windpipe. Yeah. Then once you can start breathing, that's when we can then start fighting or doing anything that you've been taught to get out of that hold. Hair, quite a lot of people wear the hair tied up, and again, it's a question I get asked: should you tie your hair up? Should you leave it loose? If you're aware that the situation is it's turning more violent, or potentially it's going to turn more violent, then I would put my hair more loose, because it's more difficult to get hold of it all. If we've got it tied up in one big sort of ponytail, then it's really easy for someone just to grab hold, and if they've got control of your head, then your body's going to follow. It's really difficult, you know, not to go, obviously. So I'll show you, we did a video here, and I don't know what happened to the second video, because the second video is the better maneuver, but I'll explain that as we go through. It's going to be painful for you, you know, who's being held. Yeah, if we do it really fast and aggressively, then it will force the hand to sort of let go of the hair. The other version is actually to twist out. So instead of twisting into the attacker, it's to twist out. And I find that the twisting out is more effective, because again, it's sending the attacker's arm and hand the wrong way. You will lose hair. Okay, it's going to be painful. You will lose some hair, but without any of these moves, it's an element of surprise, and it's you meaning it. Yeah, if we just do it half-heartedly, it's not going to work. But that is one way to get out of somebody sort of getting hold of your hair and dragging you. And this is the very last one. If, you know, when we're trying to do this conflict management and we're trying to find some space and we can't get to an exit, we're being forced back against a wall, then this is the way that we get out of this hold. So I'll play you the video and then we'll speak about it. The disadvantage, obviously, we're stuck against a wall, so we've got no exit behind ourselves. Hopefully we've got an exit right or left, and we've got to quickly decide which way we're going to aim for. The positive really is generally when people are pinning you against a wall, they're leaning into you and they're forcing all their body weight upon you. So with this maneuver, really, again, we're doing it quickly, we're taking them by surprise, and by throwing their arm off to one side, their body weight will push them forward, and we've already made a quick exit. Okay, so hopefully that's given you some very, very basic techniques to get out of the grip. And like I say, it's disengagement. We're just trying to get released from this person to make space and get away. If that doesn't work, then obviously we're into more sort of self-defense and fighting. That's a little bit more complicated. I would recommend self-defense or boxing, any sort of martial art to people, but you've got to do it regularly. It's got to be sort of muscle memory, because certainly when it comes to fighting, if we only do it sort of half-heartedly, then we're going to annoy this person even more, and they're going to get more aggressive. So when we talk about maybe striking to the nose and things, we've got to do it with a bit of aggression, and we've got to mean it. But don't go from being shouted at trying to fight somebody. We need to, the whole thing is trying to de-escalate it first if possible. So there's the principles of conflict management. And again, you know, I will give additional information for you to read up on. But it's all about keeping it simple. You know, keep it simple, stupid, because then you'll be able to remember how to do it. Don't make it overcomplicated. Keep alert, keep that awareness. It's all situational. It's about what's happening around you. I can't emphasize that enough. Have that discipline. Set your phone if you're by yourself every 15 minutes. Take time out. Yeah, get out of that big crowd, reassess. And by doing so, you probably think, hey, you know what? That looks more interesting over there. Or I think I can get a better picture from here and it's more safe. And especially if you've been in a tense situation for a while, give yourself that privilege, you know, and that you've earned that right to get out for a little bit and recharge. We all need to recharge because we work in very difficult environments for long periods of time. And, you know, you're the number one. You've got to look after your own mental and emotional health as well to keep going in a very hard workplace for long periods of time. Do we have any questions at all? That's the end of my presentation, really. Hopefully you found some useful tips there. And I will definitely send a link to Kat later tonight or tomorrow with some additional information and sort of go over those disengagement skills as well. So do we have any questions of anything that I've mentioned or anything that I haven't mentioned that people wanted to hear about and they haven't? Or
I'm not seeing any. Guys, if you have any questions, you can raise your hand and I can allow you to talk, or you can type into the box or the Q&A.
well, there's my email as well. You know, if anybody does want to get in touch about anything, then please do so.
For sure. And I will send out an email to everyone that signed up for this session. We had a shorter safety session where we talked about specific gear to wear and have a list. So I'll send that out to everybody as well. Thank you so much, Kath, for your time and for always teaching us and helping us stay safe.
No worries. And hopefully we're all, yeah, everybody stay safe, especially with the corona as well. And yeah, it'd be nice to get back to normal and meet you all face to face at some point in the future.
We have one question real quick.
Okay, cool.
Someone asked, what is the best thing to do when tear gassed?
Okay, so if you can't get your, you know, if you haven't got a mask and goggles, I'm going to send out the best sort of recommended mask and goggles to buy or how to improvise. Even with swimming goggles, you can improvise. But if if you've been caught out and you do get tear gassed, if you can see it coming and you can't get upwind, then definitely turn your back. Try and cover your face a little bit, even if it's just with your jacket or something. Because, you know, if you're perspiring or you've got makeup or you've got sun cream on, that gas is going to stick and it's going to be a big irritant. Oh, it's just gone out of my head. I'll put it in the information afterwards. There is a lotion. It's like a milk lotion, and that takes the gas off quite well. So you can use that. You need to wash your eyes out. Again, I would get a small, you know, you should have water with you. They're going to be long days and you need to keep hydrated. So if you can have a bottle of water, if you can get a little hole in the lid maybe and then pressurize the water out and it'll clean out the gas from your eyes more quickly. One thing to remember when you get home, you know, you'll have gas in your hair as well. So when you get in the shower, make sure you sort of tilt your head back and wash your hair so that the gas is going away and not running back down into your eyes as well. You know, it's that awareness really. You know, if we know that they're going to start doing the gas, then really we want to be getting upwind, especially if the wind isn't very strong, because then that gas is going to hang around even more. So try and avoid it because it's not nice. But the inevitable happens. So if you can't avoid it, get your protective equipment on quickly. Practice putting those masks on. They've got to be nice and tight. You know, it's no point having these nice masks if we haven't got them tight, because the gas will still get in and around.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kath, for your time. This will be available on rjionline.org, and anything else that Kath sends me, I will share so that everybody has access.